and liberty. We're going to try to illustrate this a little bit by this next slide. We can kind of see, let me make sure that I got this working here. We can kind of see this picture here, especially for the young people in the church. This might be something you might relate to. You see the birds, they're flying away from their cage, right? And young people sometimes wish they could be free from the cage of being at home, maybe under their parents or something like this. And it sounds good, right? Being free, being at liberty to go out and do what you want and explore the world. However, there's another side to this particular picture here. If we introduce this to the picture, does that set a little bit of context? So now you have the birds out of their cage. The problem is now they're exposed to some of the realities and the dangers outside of that cage. And things like cats and dogs and other cold and heat. So liberty might feel good, but there are laws. Laws can be represented by the cage. Laws can help keep us safe as well. And liberty is good, but we have to be very careful how we use liberty. So we're going to look at this here. Galina and Alina just showed up, so they're staring at me, so it's hard for me to concentrate. They say hello. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A very interesting statement from the Declaration of Independence, way back in late 1700s, 1776, approximately. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator, not by the government, but by the Creator, with certain unalienable or rights that are unmovable, they cannot be taken away, unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now, when we think about this, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if everyone did just whatever they wished in defense of this idea, then of course we could get chaos as well. For example, let's say everybody decided to just drive at whatever speed and whatever lane they wanted to at any time on the streets, then that type of liberty would cause problems on the streets. So we have to understand what that means. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are some that pursue happiness by doing evil things, like, for example, pedophilia, or any other kind of abuse of somebody that's weaker than you are. That can be said, well, that's my pursuit of happiness. The problem is that also incurs something not so happy for the other person. So we have to understand the responsibility that comes with liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Now, there are some biblical concepts of law, love, and freedom. All these things are intertwined. They're all connected. And that's what we're going to kind of look at here. Let's look at the first verse. 2 Corinthians, he's a God of love and freedom, by the way. It says, 2 Corinthians 3:17, now the Lord is the Spirit. It says, now the Lord is the Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is what? I don't know if I can hear you that well, but it says liberty, of course. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. God does give us freedom. Now then, that should be evident just by the fact that there's atheists today, right? There's a lot of people that don't believe in God, don't follow God, don't honor God. In fact, they use God's name in vain. They curse God. They treat God with irreverence. But God gives them that liberty to do so, even though it's at their own peril. In 1 John 4:8, it says, he that loves not knows not God, for God is love. God is a God of liberty and love. Liberty and love are very closely related because you cannot have one without the other. If God was not love, then he would force us to worship him. right? If he was not love, then he would compel us or manipulate us into following his commandments. But he doesn't do that. He gives us the liberty even to rebel, even to do what is, something not wise or destructive to ourselves or to people around us. Now, he warns us that not to do that because it does have a negative, consequence. We can use liberty, but we have to be careful with the consequences of our liberty. In John 8:32, freedom requires also truth. It says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." So truth makes you free, as opposed to lies. If we believe a lie, we can be captivated by that lie. For example, someone, especially young people, are told, if you drink alcohol, that will make you feel good. That would make you cool. That would make you, an adult. There's all kinds of things that they claim that are false. Maybe they'll even say, if you drink alcohol, a good, beer or whatever, it'll make you happy, it'll make you free. But the truth is that the fruits of that is always destruction. Destruction to the body, destruction to the mind, destruction to the soul. So knowing the truth about something is important because it frees us from the deceptions that might be out there in the world. So we have truth, love, and liberty. All those things work together. They cannot be separated. Rules help us to be free. Now, does that make any sense? Let's read that. Psalm 119, 44 through 45. "So shall I keep your law continually, forever and ever, and I will walk at liberty, for I seek your precepts." Now, I don't know about you, but many young people today, and even some older people, of course, believe that law restricts us, especially the laws of God. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not commit adultery. And then, wow, why does God, restrict us in this way? But God is saying, well, here, the psalmist is saying, if I follow God's commandments, if I keep his precepts, and I walk after them, I will actually be free. I will walk in liberty. So let's look at what that actually means. How can we explain that? How can restrictions keep us free? Well, here we have this paragraph, and then we'll read a couple other things here that'll explain it even further. But here, Child Guidance, page 79. Law and Happiness. Ellen White gives us some ideas of how this works, especially for children. But it applies to us as adults as well. It says their prompt and continual obedience to wise parental rule will promote the happiness of the children themselves, as well as the honor of God and the good of society. When children respect and obey the rules of good, wise, godly parents, it will actually promote happiness. So again, there's that concept of restrictions promote freedom, promote the good of society. It says, and they will honor God as well. Reading on, it says, children should learn that in submission to the laws of the household is their perfect liberty. Does that make sense? It seems like it doesn't, right? Also, we have to submit to an authority in order to be free. It seems to go contrary to the way we're taught to think today. Today, the way we think, if we're going to be free, that means we do not submit to authority. If we're going to be free, we do not comply with whatever, we're being told to do by our parents or by God himself. But in reality, submission to God's laws is submission to liberty. Christians will learn the same lesson, not just children, this applies to all adult Christians as well, that in their obedience to God's law is their perfect freedom. In obedience to God's law is our perfect freedom. The will of God is the law of heaven. As long as that law was the rule of life, all the family of God were holy and happy. So God makes rules and laws to keep us free from death and disaster. Now we're going to touch on that a little bit more in a minute. But let's look at a couple of columns here to show two basic concepts or categories, I'll say, categories of God's law. The one on the left says laws of morality. The one on the right says laws of nature. These are two different categories, but both created by God, of course. Laws of morality deal with things like value and protection of life, honesty, integrity, sexual conduct and boundaries of those conducts, mutual respect and honor, cause and effect. These are all laws of morality that deal with thoughts, beliefs, things that we do or don't do. Now, the laws of nature are similar in nature, but not necessarily directly related to the laws of morality. For example, in laws of nature, we have laws of physics, biology, chemistry, energy, mathematics, but also cause and effect. As many of you know, and I know I see some new faces there that I haven't met, I don't think, but while I was there, I was flying for Guardian Flight, or Hawaii Life Flight is their name there in Hawaii. And it's imperative that the pilot knows the laws of physics in order to understand how the plane stays in the air. And as long as the pilot obeys and keeps themselves in line with these laws of physics, then the plane will safely stay in the air or land and so on. So it's very important to understand that both of these laws, laws of morality and laws of nature, if obeyed and if considered as part of your daily life, you will stay free as a human being. Because of the two things at the bottom of each list, cause and effect. Cause and effect. If you break a law, there's an effect. If you go against the laws of morality, for example, if you go against the law of honesty, is that going to create peace or chaos in your home if you're constantly lying to each other in your family? It's going to cause chaos. So if you want to stay free from chaos in your family, then you have to obey the laws of honesty and integrity. Now, what about the laws of nature? If you disobey the laws of, let's say, biology, and you start smoking and drinking and eating lots of sugars and fats and things like this that break down the body's biology and the health of the body, then you will have a cause and effect situation. You're causing, or the cause is eating improperly, the effect is sickness. So I hope you understand why these two, in fact, both of these columns are very important to keep. The laws of morality that God made, and the laws of nature that also God made. So God is the lawgiver of every kind of law there is. We have to also remember that, because that's also important. So let's look at some more of these restrictions that keep us free. These are just some examples that I came up with real quick. Restrictions that keep us free. Don't play with fire. Stay free from burns. Don't speak harshly. Stay free from quarrels. Follow traffic rules. Stay free from accidents. Don't eat unhealthy foods. Stay free from sickness. Work with integrity. Stay free from poverty. Don't waste your money. Stay free from debt. Don't break the law. Stay free from prison. Don't take dangerous risks. Stay free and alive. So you see how these are just some real quick examples on how restrictions can keep us free. God is the God of liberty. He wants us to enjoy life. That's why he gives us laws that keep us restricted from doing things that will cancel out health and happiness and life itself. That's why it says earlier when we talked about the pursuit of happiness, well, the pursuit of happiness has to, if we want to be truly happy, we have to abide by certain laws, especially God's moral laws and his physical laws, in order to stay free and happy. 1 Peter 2:13, 14, and 16, use your freedom to do good. Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do what? Good. As free, yet not using your liberty as a cloak for vice or evil, but as bondservants of God. So, why did God create governments on the earth, even though they're not necessarily Christian governments or governments run by Christian people or even God-fearing people? He did so in order to maintain a society that's viable, livable, and free. So God has put, law and order in place, even among us in this world, to punish evildoers. Imagine if all of a sudden, I think actually some cities in America right now are kind of seeing the result of this. If you say we want to get rid of law enforcement, we want to get rid of law in general, then what happens to your cities and your towns? They become lawless. If there's no punishment, let's say, of stealing or lying or rape or murder, then what's going to increase in those cities? Lying, stealing, rape, and murder. Because God has put laws in place, again, even for non-believers, to punish evildoers so that society can be somewhat free to live outside of fear and danger. I hope you're starting to see this concept between law and liberty as described by the Scriptures. Let us not use our liberty in order to excuse doing bad things. That's what the Bible is saying here. Do not use your liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Use your liberty to do good. All right, here in 1 Corinthians 10, 23 to 24, use freedom with wisdom. We have to use freedom cautiously, right? We have to be careful, because with our freedom we could choose to do things that are destructive to ourselves and to our community. It says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. So it's important that as you use your liberty, your freedoms, always consider how that may affect someone else. Whether it's, again, traffic laws, for example, honesty, integrity, any of those things that, even moral laws, like if someone says, I'm a free man, I can choose to cheat on my wife, for example. Well, sure, you're free to do that, and many people do. But in the end, it hurts someone else. So that's what the Bible's saying here. Don't use your liberty for your own benefit or for your own selfish desires. Use it for the good of others. And that's how Jesus lived his life on this earth as well. He used his liberty to bless and to help others. Galatians 5:13, law, love, and liberty. Again, these are all kind of interrelated things. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh. Some people say, well, I'm a Christian. I'm saved. I'm going to heaven. So now God will just forgive me for every bad thing I do. I've actually heard people say things like this. You know, I'm going to heaven. There's nothing else I got to worry about. I can just carry on doing what I was doing. And but Paul is saying very clearly here, yes, you are set at liberty through the blood of Jesus. You have been forgiven. You have been bought. You have been redeemed. But don't use your liberty and that precious freedom from God, the freedom from the law of sin and death, you know, the consequences of the wages of sin is death. Do not use your newfound liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Does that make sense? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love your neighbor. In Matthew 22, it says those are the two great commandments. It's all about restricting yourself in order to honor God and to honor man. And when you do this, you will be truly free and happy. You will actually find, not just pursue happiness, but you will actually find happiness. In Romans 13, 1 through 3, this is another passage that has to do a lot with the other passage we dealt with a few minutes ago. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to what? Evil works. So, do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise of the same. Now, not all authority in the world is good. We've had many dictators and many despotic rulers throughout all history that have abused their authority. So the Bible's not saying that we have to, listen or obey authority at all costs. What it's saying is when they're doing their God-given duty to punish evil and to uplift good, then we should follow them. We should do what is right, because they're ordained of God to maintain His moral laws and His natural laws in society, especially the moral laws. Now, but this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Well, let me finish with this verse, and then we'll go to kind of dive into that a little bit. For he is God's minister. He's finishing up this thought, Paul here in Romans 13. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid. If you use your liberty to do bad things, then you should be afraid, because you're going to get punished. That's what the Bible's saying. For he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. It's very important to understand. The governments are there, put in place by God, to help reduce the extent of evil acts in the world. And there's a lot of evil acts in the world. I mean, there's all kinds of evil that we can think of. I won't go through the list, because you all know what I'm talking about. Therefore, you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. So we even pay taxes in order to maintain a police force, for example, or a system of judgment. You know, we have our court system. We have lawyers and all these things to help maintain civility in our society. Otherwise, society would be a chaotic, I forget, there's a certain word that I'm thinking of, but it's when there is no rule of law. It just becomes chaotic, and everybody just does whatever is right in their own eyes. Imagine if you lived in a country like that. when no one respected the rights and property of anyone else, the life or property of anyone else. It would be a free-for-all. Only the strong would survive. All right, now this is where I wanting to get to. There's a very clear distinction. Even though all laws are of God, we have to remember that there are limitations on secular laws in our government. So on the left we have religious laws. On the right we have secular, or what we would call civil and criminal laws. On the left we have religious laws that govern relations between man and deity. Worship practices and rituals. I'll just read the little list here in case you can't see them. These religious laws deal with prescribed physical and metaphysical duties, specific restrictions on behavior, religious things, speech and thought as well, modes of communication with deity, like different forms of prayer, loyalty to a set of beliefs and doctrines. As Christians, we have a loyalty to a set of beliefs and doctrines that is in the Bible, the Word of God. And the Word of God is what we as Christians choose to believe in. Now, on the right side, you have secular, civil, and criminal laws. These are laws governing relations between all members of society. And they include things like safety laws, regulations, business codes and ethics, even building codes, for example, so that, if someone's building a house, they want to make sure it doesn't fall over. They learned that the hard way in many countries when there's earthquakes and tornadoes and things. If they didn't build according to certain standards, the houses would fall and kill many people. Territorial boundaries, travel regulations, substance control and regulations, protection of civil and human rights, protection of individual life, and of course protection of personal property. These are all things that secular governments have a right to restrict and to codify. They give us the rules for these things, and I think we all kind of agree on most of these things are very important for us. Now, there's a wall of separation. There's one thing that the governments of the world cannot do, and that is they, sorry, my cat was distracting me. So that is they cannot infringe on our religious laws. They cannot tell us who to believe in, who to pray to, what to say or not say when it comes to our religious convictions. They cannot tell us how to worship or how not to worship. These things are restricted. There's a wall of separation, and I believe the Founding Fathers made this very clear in the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, if you can see that there, hopefully you can see it. If not, I'll read it for you anyway. This is the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law. How many laws? No laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. In other words, cutting short, curtailing the freedom of speech. They can make no laws respecting these things. And it goes on to say, or of the freedom of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So we see how here, Congress in those days saw that there were certain boundaries that they could not cross. Boundaries of individual conscience, boundaries of individual thoughts. They cannot cross that. That is between us and God. The government cannot infringe, establish religion, or prohibit the free exercise of religious practices either. In all that because they themselves recognize that they are not God. The government is not the ruling authority in the universe. God is the ultimate ruler of the universe. And they recognize that, even though many of the Founding Fathers were not really, dedicated Christians per se, but they understood that they themselves were just mere men faulty and erring men, and they had to draw the line. Where can we control people or make laws? And they said we cannot make laws regarding religion and the relationship between man and God. Now here we have one more thing, that both of these religious laws and secular laws, just to make this point clear, all of these laws on both sides are God's laws. God is the founder and the foundation of all good laws, even those that government takes care of. And we read that in Romans 13. God puts governments in places to help maintain societal laws and civility. Now, but my cat, he's trying to get my attention. Keeps doing things, running around the house. Sorry about that. Okay, so religious laws and secular laws are both God's laws. So while the government has restrictions on what laws they can put, God has no restrictions, except that he also honors freedom. He also honors the fact that he gives us liberty. Now, let's look at some of those laws that governments can impose on the public, but are still from God. For example, murder. Thou shalt not murder. Now, that's a law that is included in civil courts, and you can be punished for committing murder. But where did that law come from originally? From Exodus 20. I mean, as far as, in the Bible, but it came from God. Theft, that came from God. Exodus 20 is where the Ten Commandments are, so you can go there and read that. Perjury, lying, fraud, assault, that's in Exodus 21. You don't have to go there now, but child abuse, Mark 9:42. Slander, 2 Corinthians 12:20. Sexual assault, Deuteronomy 22. And inciting violence, sowing seeds of discord among the people. That's something that, is both of God and of man. Man can deal with those types of laws, but ultimately we have to remember that all laws, all good laws, are from God. And that's inciting violence is in Proverbs 6:19, where it says that there's 7 things God hates, and one of them is when people sow seeds of discord among the brethren. A very serious charge, according to God. So we don't want to sow seeds of discord among the brethren. We want to try to maintain as much unity as possible by God's grace. So these are important things that we have to understand. Christ Triumphant, chapter 2 says, does it make a nation happy to put away the laws of God? Remember, God is the one that brings all laws into existence, all good laws, of course. The countries here in Europe, this is Sister White writing about her trip, I guess, to Europe, have their laws, and the safety of the inhabitants of these countries is due to their obedience to these laws. And you know how strictly they require that these laws shall be observed. And shall anybody advocate that the Lord of the universe has no law to govern his kingdom? If man has laws in order to maintain civility in society, does God have laws? Absolutely. This is a statement in contrast, or in contesting the idea that God has no laws that are binding for us today. Is it the doctrine of Jesus Christ? I'm just reading on here in the bold letters. Is it the doctrine of Jesus Christ or of heaven that the law of God has no binding claims upon the world's inhabitants? Why the law of the Ten Commandments is the great moral standard of righteousness in heaven and on earth. This great law is the foundation of all laws, to all nations and to all families. So again, God is the foundation of all law. But there are boundaries that we have to understand. Even in the church, We have, like, let's say, for example, the Sabbath. And God has laws concerning the Sabbath, how we should keep the Sabbath, how we should not keep the Sabbath. But we are not to enforce those on other people. We are to give liberty to each other. Not that we should not preach the truth or not, make sure that we're uplifting God's law and helping people to understand what that means and how to obey God and the importance of obeying God. But we cannot force people to obey God. We cannot force people to obey. Even parents have a difficult time, forcing their own children to obey sometimes. But God gives us these liberties. But we have to, as a church, understand that while we have the liberty, we have to be careful to use it wisely. I think I have maybe one more slide here. Isaiah 25:9. And it will be said in that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. When we understand that all of God's laws are for our good, all of God's requirements are to sustain and promote life and happiness and justice and truth, then we will truly be glad when we see him face to face, because we will be thankful, as David was, for God's laws. We will be thankful that he made all the laws of nature, all the laws of morality, because that is what keeps us free. That is what keeps us happy and at liberty. It's the more we understand about God's character, the more we will understand why he gives us laws and why he gives us directions and instructions. It's because he loves us and he wants us to be free and happy. He wants us to be to prosper and to enjoy life to the fullest. So let us be aware. Let us always think about all the things that God is trying to teach us through his word and through his commandments. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And I thank you so much for this privilege and this honor to come and share a few thoughts from the word. Unfortunately, I can't hear you that well, but I pray that everything will work out for everyone there and that God will continue blessing each family. Thank you.